And it's Genesis 31, verse 1, right?
From verse 1.
Okay.
Okay. So, Sonia, please start.
Und es kamen vor ihnen die Rede der Söhne Labans, dass sie sprachen, Jakob hat alles Gute und unseres Vaters an sich gebracht und nun von unseres Vaters Gut hat er solchen Reichtum zu Wege gebracht.
Und Jakob sah an das Angesicht Labans und siehe, er war gegen ihn nicht mehr wie zuvor.
Now, Elisa or Abraham.
ויאמר אדוני אל יעקב, שוב אל ארץ אבותיך ולמולדך, ואהיה עמך.
רחל.
וישלח יעקב.
Und ließ rufen Rahel und Lea aufs Feld zu seiner Herde.
Annika.
Und sprach zu ihnen, ich sehe an eures Vaters Angesicht, dass er gegen mich nicht ist wie zuvor. Aber der Gott meines Vaters ist mit mir gewesen.
Jonathan.
בהי? אנחנו בהי? ואתן ידעתן כי בכל כוחי עבדתי את אביכן.
Dagmar, your turn.
Morgen, good morning.
Verse. I don't hear you.
I cannot really hear you. I hear the Germans very well, but I don't hear you so much. So I will be the quiet listener and see what I get first.
See
okay,
what
I'm
we
sorry.
Have. Okay, Axel with your voice. Verse 7.
Verse 7. Und er hat mich getäuscht und 10-mal meinen Lohn verändert, aber Gott ihn nicht gestattet, dass er mir Schaden täte.
Timotheus, Pasuk 8.
גם בגרמנית? אתה שומע אותי?
עכשיו אני שומע אותך.
כן. גם בגרמנית או באנגלית?
באיזה שפה שאתה רוצה, אפילו ביוונית אם אתה רוצה.
אז פסוק 7.
פסוק 8.
8, סליחה. אם כה יאמר נקודים יהיה שכרך, ילדו כל הצאן נקודים, ואם כה יאמר עקודים יהיה שכרך, ילדו כל הצאן עקודים.
רולי? פסוק 9. רולי? אתה במיוט. טוב, דניאל, פסוק ט'. דניאל?
כן, אני כאן.
אז פסוק ט'.
כן, דקה. תן למישהו אחר ואני...
אוקיי, נעבור, we'll come to you later. ברברה,
Nein. So hat Gott die Güter eures Vaters ihm entwunden und mir gegeben.
אוקיי, רולי, פסוק י'. דניאל, פסוק י'.
ויהי בעת יחם הצאן, וישא עיניי, וארא בחלום, והנה העתודים עולים על הצאן, נקודים וברודים.
רולי?
זה הייתי אני.
11.
ויאמר אלי מלאך אלוהים בחלום יעקב, ואומר הנני.
Okay, Annika?
Er aber sprach, hebe deine Augen auf und sieh, alle Böcke, die auf die Herde springen, sind sprenklig, gefleckt und bunt. denn ich habe alles gesehen, was Laban dir antut.
Sonja.
Ich bin der Gott, der dir zu Bethel erschienen ist, wo du den Stein gesalbt hast, und du hast mir das selbst Eingelegte getan. Nun mach dich auf und zieh aus diesem Lande und kehre zurück in das Land deiner Verwandtschaft.
Abraham.
And Rahel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house?
Who is there? Chezi.
הלא נוכריות נחשבנו לו, כי מחרנו, ויאכל גם אכול את כספנו.
רמי.
إن كل الغنى الذي سلبه الله من أبينا هو لنا ولأولادنا، فالآن كل ما قال لك الله افعل.
Dagmar, you want to try now?
Ja, da machte sich Jakob auf und lud seine Kinder und Frauen auf die Kamele.
So we'll stop here. I'll tell you why I chose these verses. It was because of Lech Lecha. It's a repeat. It's another version of Lech Lecha, and I think it'll be very interesting to compare it with the original Lech Lecha. I just want to ask one question, and then anyone that wants to comment, please raise a hand, and you'll have 2 to 3 minutes to comment. Unless Timotheus would like to respond. I asked Axel also to respond, but he claimed that he has a cold, so he has diplomatic disease. He's out. Dagmar, all the older people have more time, because time, as you grow older, time goes slower. So, but the young people can have 2 minutes. Anyway, the point that I would like to make is a point that we had an argument in Wittenberg, is the way that God speaks to people. And is it an inner voice? Does he hear it? Is it someone else that talks to him? So in just one point, in Lech Lecha, God tells Abraham, Lech Lecha, go on. But in here, the verse 1, the voice of God seems to come from the sons of Laban. I don't know if they were wealthy people or not wealthy people. They're good or bad, we don't know. But their comment is derogatory. It's bad comment that Yaakov has taken away all that was our fathers, and then Yaakov decides to move, and only in verse 3 God speaks to him. But it seems that God started talking to him in verse 1. So what I wanted to ask you is, again, what do you see that the way that God speaks to a person? Why was it that Yaakov had to see it first from the sons of Lavan? The chapter does not start with verse 3. It starts with verse 1. What is the point here? And also when Yaakov talks to Rachel and Leah, in verse 5, he does not tell them that God told me what to do. He tells them that I see the face of your father and I think that he doesn't like me anymore. So this seems to be a stronger reason to leave than God talking to him, because this was the first thing, and then that God told him to leave. And also when they reply, so they said, we have no point of staying because our father sold us, and then whatever God tells you to do, go ahead and do. I think it's when it appears 3 times in the structure, appears 3 times in 17 verses, it has a meaning. It's a tremendous difference than Lech Lecha. When God tells Abraham to go, he doesn't ask a question. He doesn't say that he called Sarah over and asked her, should we leave or we should not leave? What should we do? He simply goes and that's it. Okay, this is my question. Now, Timotheus, anything?
Actually, I didn't think about that point. Something else than you already mentioned.
Okay, so within later, Axel.
So let me try to explain what I see. I mean, what's really interesting, if you compare the verses one with the verse, or if you see the structure that you mentioned, it's maybe you hear the voice of somebody and you don't know what it should mean, but later on you maybe realize that in this voice you had an encounter with the voice of God, and maybe this is what the structure tells. At first we meet person with a excuse me, with a human voice, and later on it's like an explanation.
So verse 1, how do you explain verse 1? This was from God.
Nobody knows. So you have the voices of Laban, and so Jacob knew that something has changed while he listens to the sons of Laban, right? And afterwards he gets a lech lecha by God. So maybe this is like a like a preparation or something like that.
Okay, Dagmar, anything?
Yeah, I tried to get in because I'm not so, because I wasn't in Wittenberg and I'm not familiar with the discussion. I mean, the interesting point is that everybody here seems to say something which is not really true. I mean, Jacob is rich, not because of his situation with Laban, but because he betrayed his own brother. So already in the first sentence, there is something which is not really working out, because Jacob's betrayal and Jacob being the man he is because of his own family history. And then he sees Laban, and then God speaks to him, and then he doesn't tell Leah and Rachel what God told him, but explaining this with something else. And I'm a little bit thinking if this means, or this is a sign of the Hebrew Bible that Jacob is not close to God. I mean, in Lech Lecha, it's God is saying something, and immediately the action is following. And you have other examples, maybe by the prophets like Eliyahu, where the speaking of God and speeches, we in a kind of mixture with the speaking of the prophet. You can sometimes even not deciding if God is speaking through the prophet or the prophet is speaking himself. It means there is a very close connection between the human being and God. And here I could imagine that it's not only about calculation and only because he thinks Rachel and Leah would better react to his actual telling than to what tells him, but that is mean to show a distance between Yaakov and God.
So you say that Yaakov was farther away from God than, let's say, Abraham.
Yeah.
And that's why it repeats itself 3 times.
Yeah.
That the main reason is like family politics, and not the order of God.
Yeah.
Okay, just one more point that I would like to show you, that the words that God uses to Yaakov are very much like the words that were told to Abraham, but in reverse order. He told him, go from your land of your fathers and the place of your birth, and here it says, shuv, return to your land of your fathers and the place that you were born. Just a comment. Anyone wants to raise a hand? Anyone? Elisa, okay. Elisa and then Daniel.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was just wondering because what's your name again? You're just speaking about what? Dagmar?
Yeah.
Dagmar? You're saying that you think that Yaakov was somewhat further away from God or not as close to God as Abraham was. And I'm just wondering, when God says to Abraham, Lechacha, did Abraham have to understand something first on his own? Did he have to see a reason on his own to leave first? Or did God just tell him to go
I
and he accepted?
don't hear you well. At least I don't hear you well.
I'll say, I was wondering, when God tells Abraham, Lechacha, if Abraham had to understand a reason to go, a reason to leave on his own before hearing the prophecy, or if it's like Yaakov, where Yaakov had to see that the situation wasn't good, and that there was something bad there, and then God told him to go. Because it seems like Yaakov had to understand that there was something bad, there was something a problem between him and Lavan before being told the prophecy to go. I was just wondering how it is with Abraham. If it's similar.
Good, very good question, Daniel.
So a couple things, if I can just sort of process what a few people have said, in terms of what Alyssa just said, and I touching back to what Axel said also, what Rav Shabtai said, that Yaakov first has to perceive something and only then hear God. There's a sense that God may say something, but you have to be in a certain mental state where you're ready to receive it in order to actually hear it. Now, is that true? That seems to be true here for Yaakov. In other words, Yaakov has to perceive something, and then only then can he hear what God is telling him. And that seems not to be true with Abraham twice. First, in Lech Lecha, God appears out of the blue and says, "Go to the land I'll show you." And then again with the binding of Isaac, where God says, "Go sacrifice him." There's no sense that Abraham anticipates either of those things ahead of time. Dagmar. Sorry.
So what do you conclude from there?
But okay, so what I'm suggesting is that maybe that is another point in favor of what Dagmar is suggesting, that there is a closeness or a receptivity, a greater receptivity that Abraham has toward what God is saying as opposed to Yaakov. Abraham is able to hear things without any preparation, and act on them immediately, both the hearing and the action. Both in the case of Lech Lecha and in the case of the binding of Isaac, Abraham hears without any preparation and goes without any further discussion. Neither of those things is true of Yaakov here. That Yaakov on both counts, Yaakov has to perceive something, and then also he has to kind of process it. The other thing I wanted to add is, and again, possibly following up on or further confirmation of what Dagmar is suggesting, Yaakov has two prophecies that we've seen so far. One where he leaves the land of Canaan, and he has the dream about the ladder. And here, where God speaks to him, and he has this vision of the sticks and the spots going on the sheep. Both of those are visions. They're visual prophecies in a way that we don't find with Abraham. We don't even find with Isaac. The fact that God has to communicate to Yaakov through those signs, through those visual symbols, suggests a different kind of relationship and maybe a less immediate kind of relationship than he has with Abraham.
So we'll speak about this relationship later. So basically you agree with Dagmar.
I'm suggesting that there's evidence that there's evidence to support her claim. I have to think about it. It's something I never thought about before. But there are certainly differences between Yaakov and Abraham that suggest that there's some difference in their relationship with God.
Jonathan, רק תעשה unmute yourself.
Yes, okay. Hi, you can hear me?
Your turn.
Okay. I want to say something that Daniel said it, actually, but there is a difference between Abraham and Jacob all over the life. Abraham is a more simple, connected to God, has a more simple speak with God. Everything that God says, he does, and not really, but everything that he speaks with God, not through things in the nature, but through God. And with Jacob, it's always more complicated. when he needs want to get something, he needs to steal the bracha, and he needs to kind of, use the situation with Esav when he comes from the sadeh, from the field, and he's very hungry, and said, okay, if you want to eat, I'll give you something. With Jacob, it's always more complicated. He always have to work behind the back of someone, things through nature, not directly, not directly in the face of God, but he has to hear. He has to first hear the things through the nation, through the people.
You agree?
So maybe it's a different.
Agree with Dagmar. That
Yes,
Abraham listened to God immediately and not
through people.
Okay. Chezi, you wanted to say something.
No.
And Avitam.
Okay, Rolly.
I just wanted to. I just wanted to put what Dagmar said in different words. I feel like the way that Yaakov is talking and the way that he's talking with Rachel and Leah, it sounds more like me. I mean, I'm not always what the need is. I halfway try to understand what goes on around me and what is the right thing to do, and half of it sounds like I'm trying to convince him while I'm doing it. Whereas with Abraham, he is the kind of the forefather that knows what's up. He's getting very clear messages, and with Yaakov, it's after he has the bad situation with the son and then Lavan himself, and God tells him, well, okay, you're gonna go now. And like you said, this repeats itself several times, and I just wanted to say that it feels more like the kind of things that I go through.
Abraham, you want to say comment?
Yeah, I also have the view that Abraham had a special relationship with God, and Jacob was something else with the context, because of what has happened. The words of God were more of an assurance to Jacob: go back to your people and I will be with you. But with Abraham, that is why he's really the father of faith. It is out of vacuum, out of nothing, go, I'll show you. But with Jacob, I'm thinking he has a context, he has a background in this context. That's what I think.
Okay, anyone else? Since everyone agrees with Dagmar more or less, so someone has to differ, otherwise we'll end in a consensus. Rami, and then Sonia, and then Elisa.
Gam.
Yes.
Avitam and Elisa raised their hands very early and for a very long time.
Yes, but she spoke already and Rami did not.
No, not me, Aviram. Not me.
Okay. I just in verse 2 it says that Jacob saw that the face of Laban had changed for him. I think Jacob is very let me say spontaneous and kind person. Like when he asked to marry Rachel before, in the chapters before, and then Laban gave him her sister, and he worked for extra 7 years, and then now he hasn't heard anything from Laban concerning like his conclusion. He just saw his face and he felt that his face is not as it seems to be yesterday. It seems for me, according to the question of how God speaks to us or how Jacob had heard him, he's very sensitive to the extent that even he was spontaneous enough when he saw the Laban's face had changed. He just asked his wives and shared them what is in his heart. I think if God had presented himself to Moses, that I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob, for me, Abraham is like the faith and Isaac is the obedience. And Jacob is how he has a very sensitive heart. He just see the face and he felt something goes wrong, spontaneously share with the daughters, his wives. It's about how I adjust my frequency or my receiver to get the frequency of God. It's about us more than God.
So you say that Abraham is tuned to people. He can see God's wish through watching people, watching the world.
I think he's saying that Jacob is tuned to people, not Abraham. Did I understand correctly?
What? Jacob, yes.
He's saying that Jacob, as opposed
Jacob
to...
is tuned to people, right?
Yes, like Abraham tuned by faith and Isaac by obedience. And I think I can say that Laban is like sensitive enough to see and get the message from every people, even from the face. So
very interesting, Rami. Thank you. Elisa.
Oh, no, Abraham.
Hi, I want to say something. Okay. I think also in response to Dagmar, I wanted to compare Yaakov to Moshe, to Moses, when God told him to
Moshe?
To Moshe. Yeah. Okay. When God told him to go back to Egypt and to take the Israelites out of Egypt, so at first God told him to go to. He didn't tell him to take them out. It told him to go and convince Pharaoh to take him out. So God wants his prophets, his people to not to be like only believers, but to act in real politics. And also, after God told Moshe to go and take them out, he went to Yitro and asked for his permission to go out. So it's like what Yaakov did. He
did not leave Yitro without permission.
Yeah, and if we consider Moshe as the closest to God, I don't think that we can say about Yaakov that he was farther from
so
God.
You mean if someone is close to God, he should still watch his manners?
Yeah.
And yes, okay. It's close to what Rolly said, that Abraham knew everything, didn't have to ask anything, and Yaakov felt that he has to ask.
Okay. I just want to note that Rav Shabtai admitted that I have manners.
No, but hello,
just one short remark, but this I think is a side pick. When you said reminds you at Moshe, at Moses, I'm not quite sure. I think this is the only times in the Hebrew Bible where we have it so clear that the Israelites are accused to taking the wealth from the country or the people they live in, because this is what you have at the beginning of Exodus, Exodus chapter 1 and 2, and this is what you have here. It's the same motive. So the Israelites taking away what belongs to us. But this is maybe only a sidekick, but I was just thinking about that when you told about Moshe.
Interesting. Timotheus, you wanted to comment?
No.
No. Okay, anyone else?
Yes. Wanted to comment. Sonia,
please.
Yes, can you hear me? I think my internet connection is not as good. Okay, I just want to pick up on what Rami says, because I think we have to keep in mind that Jacob's life to that chapter has always been struggle. His birth has been struggle. He has struggled with his brother. When he wanted to get married, he struggled with Laban. So maybe it's not only the relationship with God that plays into this in his reaction to the command of God, but also the relationship to Laban, because maybe Jacob actually expects conflict when he leaves, so he hesitates and he doesn't do it right away. That could also be a difference to Abraham, because he's more expecting conflict and attuned to the other people, that he reacts differently to comment to God.
I have a short comment, just to, again, another question. We spoke in Wittenberg about comfort zone. We said that Lech Lecha is about leaving the comfort zone. And the whole time I think, what is a person's comfort zone? Many families are in bad relationship and they stay together because they are used to it already. So what Sonia said, he's used to struggle, so the struggle became his daily routine. And so when he saw Lavan's face every day, the same thing, he was in his comfort zone. It was struggling, it was unpleasant, but he was used to it. It was 20 years. that he had this. It was long enough time to get used to it. Now he has to leave, and to break the relationship is difficult. But in some way, he has to start a new life. So, and maybe it's also something that it comes to show us that it's not only to leave a place of comfort and to go to an unknown land, but it's also difficult to leave a place of uncomfort, of struggle, and to go to another place. It's also a decision to move, and it's not an easy thing to do. Hello, Miriam. We don't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Anyone else wants to comfort about this Lech Lecha Axel?
Yes, I want. What's interesting to me is that God commands Jacob to get back to his fatherland and to his family, which was actually not which also was a struggling situation, or struggling with Esav and so on. So this was not family life in harmony that he should flee to from the conflict with Laban and his family. Excuse me. So this is quite interesting that actually get a command by God to leave the one conflictuous situation, which became maybe his second nature or his comfort zone, but to return to another situation, or to the first situation where he fled from because of the conflict. We know that in the end, Esav and Jacob made peace, but nobody knew it in this very moment.
Very good point. Let's just to ask you, we have an advantage that we know the end. We know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
But do you see in God's words to Yaakov any promise that he goes away from conflict to life of peace? We know that the conflict with Lavan was nothing compared to the conflicts that he was about to face with his brother, with his daughter, with the angel, with terrible, terrible conflicts that await. And do you see that God tells him, leave the conflict and you'll be in peace? Is there any promise of peace? He says, I'll be with you. But does it mean that you'll have peace?
No, there's only the promise, I'll be with you. And actually, when Abraham got the Lech Lecha by God, he didn't know what he would meet. So maybe conflict as well. So he didn't know, and he got the command and went further. But why should God command Jacob to leave a situation of conflict? Everyone would expect the situation would improve when I leave this conflict.
But do you think that he expected the situation to improve?
Jacob.
Did he think that once I leave, everything will be okay? Once I leave my horrible father-in-law, from now on, everything will be fine.
No, not everything will be fine, but things may improve. Things may get better. I don't know how and in which extent, but the situation as it is right now is a situation without any perspective.
Abraham raised his hand, and let Abraham speak, but I like a question based on what Dagmar said. People want freedom. Freedom does not mean life of peace. Freedom may be a different conflict. It's before there was conflict of a slave with his master, and now there will be other conflicts, maybe worse conflicts. and still people fought for freedom. When the Jews left Egypt, they had life of conflict. They were contentious people. They did not. You don't see in Exodus or in Numbers peace. You see what Moses said in Deuteronomy. You were fighting with God since I knew you. So do you think that Yaakov, the story of Yaakov, and also Aviram said, like Moshe, do you think it's like asking for freedom? Abraham, when he was told Lech Lecha, was leave your comfort zone and go to another land. But maybe Yaakov simply wants freedom and he is willing to pay the price. Abraham, please, your turn.
Yeah, I'm of the view that looking at the text carefully, like Sonja said earlier, the case of Jacob is constant struggle, constant conflict, and in the assurance of God here in the verse is just assurance that there is more conflict ahead, there's more confusion ahead, there's more difficulty ahead, but I will be with you. God never promises taking him from a comfort zone to another comfort zone, but God promises that you'll be going through difficulties, but I will be with you. But for Abraham, God gave him the assurance, I will give you something ahead. But for him, the presence of God will be with him through his difficulties. So like Sonja said, the struggle continues for Jacob.
So how you understand the promise of I will be with you?
I get it in the point that you will go through the struggle still. The struggle has not ended, but you will survive.
Yes, I see, but I understand what you said. So you said the struggle did not stop. So what does it mean I will be with you? If you still struggle and you have to win on your own, you have to go to fight. So what is the meaning I will be with you? I will help you win. Is it something else? I guarantee that at the end you will prevail. What the words? What should Yaakov understand, or what do we understand from the words "I will be with you"?
Meaning, I look at it from the angle that Jacob have to put in his very best, have to do everything in his capacity to overcome the situation ahead of him, because God is with him. That's how I see it from that angle.
Okay, anyone? Anyone want to, Dagmar? Please.
I'm thinking if to understand what happens here, we have to go back to chapter 28, because I was just thinking of the narrative of Jacob and how he struggled, because I found this idea that he was really a struggled person also very interesting. And then we have the situation where Jacob dreams. He's lying down and he has this dream in chapter 28. And at the end of, and then God comes to him in a dream, saying him, okay, but I will be with you. It's the same idea of being with you. And then at the end, Jacob would say, and if I return safely to my father's house, then will Adonai be my God. That's 21 in chapter 28. And so having this in mind and keeping that now we have exactly the situation where it's about coming home to his father's house, it is at that point that Yaakov did not acknowledge that Adonai is his God. He said beforehand, when I return to the home of my father, then I would acknowledge Adonai as my God. So maybe this is the backside of the story here, because here's exactly now the moment where God tells him to return, and that would be another sign of being this distant relationship struggle to God.
So you say the relationship is not certain.
No,
but look,
Jacob himself said that. He said, only if I return home, then Adonai is my God. So he himself said, in the direct situation which belongs to the story, to the backside, that's not certain.
Very interesting. So how do you explain in verse 5, our chapter 31, verse 5, and he says that the God of his fathers ist mir gewesen. It was already. He was with me the whole time. So he said God fulfilled his promise.
Yeah, but this is also what he experienced in 21 before he said that, because he had this dream and God was with him. He was building him even an altar. And even afterwards, he still said, but only if I return, he will be my God. So, of course, he has a connection, but he did not really proclaim at that point that Adonai is my God. I see what you're saying, but I still would say this doesn't go against that interpretation.
So I would like to hear before Sonia, before I let you, just what you think about verse 5. He tells his wives two things. I see the face of your father, and the God of my fathers was with you. How does it connect? But he tells them two statements in one verse. The two statements connect, don't connect. What's happening here? Sonia, please.
I would read verse 5 more as an expression of insecurity, because he heard in verse, 2 or 3 that God said, I'll be with you. And so his first reaction is to go to his wives and says, okay, he has been with me, so maybe he will be with me. Maybe it's an expression of insecurity more than a proclamation.
Very interesting. So go to verse 7. How will you explain verse 7?
I have to read it. Maybe Axel can go first.
Okay, please, Axel.
I just wanted to add one observation. We have here in verse 5, we have the God of my father, and the verse that Dagmar explained before was the Lord will be my God. So there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
You have the God of my father and my God. So there, I would rather see it as a sign or a sign for insecurity. Really, he made experiences, but he is not. He made good experience with this God, but he is not in the safe harbor yet.
So you mean that the God of my fathers it means something insecure. He's not my God yet. He's the God of my fathers. That's what you mean?
I would say I find it quite remarkable that he doesn't say my God was with me. He says the God of my father was with me.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel?
More tradition than belief.
What?
More tradition than actual personal belief.
More tradition than belief. And if you were a Bible scholar, you would have said this was the ancient Near East, that the strength was the God of your fathers. They worshipped, in some cultures, they worshipped the fathers. I don't know how it was in Aram, but you could say that this was the language that he thought that Rachel and Leah will understand. But we are talking now from our viewpoint. We are the players and not the ancient Near East. So I don't know. It's a point.
But I just
that Axel brings this very interesting point. Yes, Daniel.
But just to sharpen Dagmar's point, in other words, it's not that Jacob doesn't have a relationship with God until that point, but the relationship is mediated through Isaac and Abraham's relationship. In other words, Yaakov has a relationship with God, but it's the God of his fathers. The first time that God speaks directly to Yaakov is the beginning of chapter 28, and that's where the question, will God have a personal, immediate relationship with Jacob himself? And that's where I can hear what Dagmar is saying, that the relationship at that point is conditional. Up until this point, God hasn't fulfilled that condition, and therefore at this point, Yaakov still refers to God as the God of my fathers. It's only when he actually returns that there's that personal connection between Yaakov and God is fully cemented.
So again, in one sentence, how do you explain the father's point?
the father's point is that Yaakov's relationship with God up until that point is mediated through God's relationship with Abraham and Yitzchak, and is not yet personal in the sense that God has chosen Jacob as the next link in the chain.
Very interesting. Anyone? Anything?
Yeah, what?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Anyone raise the hand here? I don't see.
Oh yeah, is it okay? Me and Abraham?
Yes.
Okay. I was gonna say one small thing because Abraham wanted to say something first, but it's connected to what you all
Closer to the microphone, it is.
Sorry. Okay. I thought it was interesting that, as I remember, I have to check, but as I remember, even though Yaakov said, "God, my fathers," when God spoke to Lavan, Lavan said that your God spoke to me. It says like Shechem or something like that. I have to find where it is again, but it's just interesting that Lavan says your God, and Yaakov says the God of my fathers.
Right.
I'll have to find it.
Okay.
I want to say something too.
Chapter 32.
Oh.
Chapter 32?
Okay. I would like to present an alternative view. What?
I want to say something too, something small.
Wasn't 32.
Huh? What?
I want to say something small too.
Yes.
Yeah. About what God told Yaakov that he will be with him. So I found the same thing that God told Moshe when he sent him to take the Israelites out. So I think that it's the standard of God when he sends someone on a mission. So it's a promise that you will succeed in your mission.
But why? Why the fathers? You know, I would like to suggest something else. I cannot go with the crowd. It's impossible. You're all too harmonious. You all say the same thing. So I'll just try to throw a spanner in the wheels. Maybe it's totally the opposite. Maybe Abraham, in order to fulfill God's orders, has to be aloof from reality. He says, if I work within the reality, I will not be able to do anything. If he goes to Egypt and he sees that his wife is taken from him, he will lose all faith. So he has to raise himself, live in some sort of denial. I exist in a different level. I have direct connect. I am a man of God. I am not a man of this world. And this world he has a duty in this world, but he has, like you said, a direct relationship with God. And then Yitzchak is different. He goes and he sows and he's blessed. He's blessed physically, financially. And then Yaakov struggles. So the thing is, where you find God? You find God on a high level. You find God where you are. Maybe when Yaakov talks about the God of his fathers, he talks about an evolution. I am Abraham, and I can hear the Lech Lecha. I am Yitzchak, and I am something extra. Meaning, my God was not developed yet, but it's developing. So in the meantime, I am no worse than Abraham. I can live aloof from reality and speak to God. I can live like Yitzchak and be blessed, and whatever I did was tremendously blessed. But I'm developing my own God also, and it takes time. But it's an addition. It's like, you know, we are not only lizards and monkeys, we are humans. So we have something in our brain that keeps habit like a lizard, and something we have that reminds us of an ape, but we are human. So the same way, maybe Yaakov tries to explain the evolution, because all this family was the family of Abraham. And maybe they thought, you know, Yaakov is not really up to Abraham's standard. God does not intervene for him in such a dramatic way like he did with Abraham. It was not so wonderful like when Eliezer came and found Rivka. It's before the story was more beautiful, was idyllic, and now the story is more realistic. So is it an advance or is it a step backwards? And I think maybe the text tries to tell us that it's a greater challenge to see God's will in reality. What Rami mentioned in the beginning. It's when you hear God, you are certain, you have no doubts. But when you see Lavan's face and you understand the sons of Lavan, so you don't know, should I struggle? Should I fight? Should I tell them that I did not take anything from you, Father? On the contrary, because of my blessing, your father has anything. Before that he was poor, before that he had nothing, and now he's rich. He's rich from me, and I am not rich from him. He decides, he understands God's message. He says, don't argue, quit. And this is a much greater challenge to get the proper reaction and to get the right conclusion. And God agrees with you. So instead of God telling Abraham what to do, Yaakov decides and God agrees with him. And I think this is, this is advancement, like in a driving lesson. At first they tell you, turn the wheel here and turn the wheel there. Afterwards, when you graduate, when you are a better driver, you make a decision and the teacher tells you, okay, you did right. This is just a different, as I said, just to disrupt the harmony here. Daniel.
One way of putting that, not that it captures everything you're saying, is that Yaakov's relationship with God is more complicated than Abraham's. Abraham's is more simple and straightforward, maybe because he needs it to be, and maybe for other reasons. Yaakov's is more complicated in that his relationship with God has to be situated in a whole network of relationships, which include other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sonia.
But I would still, from my point of view, as I read the text, I would still say that Jacob hasn't learned yet fully how to trust in the commands of God, because I think that's only going to happen when he now leaves for his father's land and the struggle that is to come, where he learns that regardless whether his way will contain struggle or easy path, he can trust that it will all serve in his good or in his favor at the end. This is something he hasn't learned yet. So I think he's more hesitating now, because that point has still to come, because his relationship is more complicated, as Daniel said, with God.
So more complicated, how do you see more complicated? When you say more complicated, when Daniel said more complicated and you say more complicated, I'm not sure you meant the same thing. Sonia, how do you find more complicated?
I think more complicated because he expects trouble to come, because he doesn't expect it to be easy, and I think he still sees conflict as a sign of something is going bad, not that it may serve in his favor. So,
and Abraham did not see conflict?
Pardon me? What?
And Abraham did not see conflict, did not expect conflict?
He did, but I think Abraham trusts, like with the binding of Isaac, that the conflict may play out in his favor. He doesn't know how, but in the end, God will have it, will make it that it plays out for his good. Like the binding of Isaac. Of course, this is going to be a conflict, but he trusts that there will be an ending he cannot foresee yet, but it will be a good ending. And I don't think that Jacob has this trust yet, so he has to struggle with God in some way. And this is yet to come.
Very interesting. Miriam, you raised your hand? No. Okay, so Dagmar did and Annika. First Dagmar, then Annika, yes.
Maybe first Annika, because she raised her hand earlier.
Okay, very good, Annika.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure whether we can say that there are different levels. Like what Sonia says, it's not only that you say it's more complicated, but you say that, or when we talked before, it's like Abraham is more closer, or he trusts God more, or that that's in a driving lesson he isn't as Jacob isn't as far as Abraham, but maybe it's just different people have different relationships with God, and each one is it's fitting for the one is fitting for Yaakov and the other one is fitting for Abraham. And if Jacob would be someone who would be, if he wouldn't need, maybe it's good that he needs to see Laban's face before. You know what I mean? It's not different levels, it's just a different way, and each way is good for.
So Yaakov, you said, like Rami said, that Yaakov is simply in tune with people. He can understand people.
Not so sure. I just say there are different ways to understand God, and God knows how we are, and he does. Maybe God tunes differently to Yaakov than to Abraham, and the tuning is not different, not only different from Yaakov to God, but from God to Yaakov.
I see. Okay, Dagmar.
Yeah, I'm just trying to process what Annika just said. I found it very interesting. I see see Jacob of somebody struggling, and I'm returning back to this chapter in 28, because I was asking, what is it with Jacob? Is his personal belief or it's tradition? And after he had this immense experience, seeing the heaven open and people's going upside down, which is, if you see it as a picture, it's one of the strongest images we have in Genesis. Also, if you see old church paintings, so in the churches, this is something we have often painted. And he has this incredible experience. And what's he doing? He's building an altar. So he's going into action, doing what's right. You see something, you build an altar. So we don't hear about the reflection or what it means for him, for his personal belief. He goes into action. This is a very Calvinist thing. That's why I maybe have also, I can see something good in it. But that will also add to that idea of being insecure. He doesn't know what to believe, but he knows what to do with that.
Before I let Rami comment, I just to make some hypothesis. Imagine if we would like to meet God. So we have a promise that God will be with Abraham and God will be with Jacob. And we want to see God. And you remember that Avimelech tells Yitzchak that we saw that God was with you. So if God is with you, we come to you, we meet God. Your house is the house of God in some way. So we want to meet God, and we have a choice. We can go to Abraham's house, and we know that God is with Abraham, and we can visit Jacob, and we know that God is with Jacob. Where will we prefer to go? Where do we think we will be more in tune with God? In Abraham's house or in Jacob's house? Just a crazy question. In the meantime, I let Rami think about it, and let's hear Rami.
I'm still figure out your question concerning verse 5 and going through even the last point. We find a lot of buts, like verse 5, saying that I see the face of Laban is a bit different, but God, my father, was there. And we find in verse 7 concerning the deceiving of the change of wages, but God did not allow him to hurt me. And concerning
you read us in the Arabic translation. The but I did not hear the but is in the Arabic.
Yes,
the but is in translation. What?
It's in Arabic. It's I mentioned also but means lakin. So it means that although your father face had changed to me, lakin, but God, my father, was there.
Interesting.
So I mean,
in the Hebrew, there is no but.
May
Yes,
I mention that we learned that Hebrew may be also used as a but.
What?
That's what we learned in biblical Hebrew.
The vav could be used as a but. Yes, but I think the but comes from the interpreter. It's in the eyes of the beholder. I know that vav, of course, could be but it depends how you read it. It's in the reader's mind, not in the text.
Mm-hmm.
Because vav could be could be but, could be something else. Okay. Yes.
Upon your point, if we may ask how how can I be with God and I have this life which is not in peace, I think we as a persons, we cannot examine peace except after war. We cannot examine victory until we have our own conflict. So God being with us is to see and feel and experience his presence in all our wars and conflicts. This is verse 5, the father's face, Laban's face is different, but God with me. In verse 7, change the wage, but God didn't allow him to make any harm to me. Verse 9, God has taken away the livestock of your father and gave me. So I think the one who is always very sensitive to see God's presence and hands in his wars, conflicts in life, this is what means that God is there, not God is there equal to the vacuum piece, to be in the bottle, protected of everything. It's vice versa. It's in the sea, in the waves, and I can see him, although I'm hit by the waves all over my journey in the sea.
So if I'll rephrase what you said in one sentence, Lavan doesn't have the power to drive God away. We don't say where Laban is, there is no God. And when there is God, there is no Laban. No, even Laban cannot, even Lavan cannot chase God away.
Yes, even Laban exists with his challenge. God is there, and on contrary, it's more dark of Laban what's doing, but the light of God appears more stronger because it's defeating the darkness now.
Yes, so when God is with Abraham in Egypt, then God punishes Pharaoh and brings tremendous plagues over him. Here God lives with Laban, he does not punish Laban, and still they live together. Somehow there is some sort of working relationship between God, Yaakov, and Lavan.
As a dynamic relationship, totally agree. And also, I ask for your excuse. I need to move now to my appointment, so it's very nice to meet every one of you. And I don't want to interrupt the text's interpretation. And thanks for arranging this meeting. And please, I would like to have another meeting as soon as we all agree upon another time.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Hello. Okay, any more comments? Now the last round of comments before we ask everyone to just with a short statement sum up something, because we will not finish this discussion now. That's this discussion is so successful that I think it should go on. And please correct me, Axel and Timotheus and Dagmar. I think it's also a very Christian idea that the greatness of God is that He's with us when we suffer. That His presence does not mean that we'll stop suffering and we'll win. He's with us and we suffer and we go on suffering. He doesn't guarantee that we'll stop suffering.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not so, but that's what I think.
Correct.
Yes, but I would not see it as a Christian idea. I mean, we have it in the Psalms all the way. So, I mean, so the promise of God's presence is not the promise that you have a life without any difficulties or whatever.
Right.
I mean,
I sorry.
Is that a Jewish way of thinking as well?
Oh, it's definitely Jewish thinking, no doubt about it.
Yeah. So I think here we have something in common.
Well,
Yes,
there's all sorts. There's all sorts.
I would on the one hand agree, and on the other hand, of course, I mean, also there is this Christian tradition because there was a Jewish tradition where the Christian tradition could build on. On the other hand, if we see the Gospels and see how big and how large the story of the suffering is, if you would compare it with other parts of the Gospel. So there's Jesus a little bit around little bit wandering around in the Galilee, and then you have this long story of his suffering. So there is a certain emphasis in Christianity on the suffering, and also to glorify the suffering. And we had it in our tradition.
And you don't need a happy end.
You don't need a happy hand, but I would see it really also critical, this glorifying of the suffering, which we often had in church history. If you see the medieval time, the late medieval time, so there is quite an emphasis. But of course, I agree with Axel, has been also a Jewish tradition where this could build on. But I see sometimes a glorifying of suffering, which can be, on the other hand, a comfort for people who are really suffering. But on the other hand,
In my mind, the best example is chapter 89 in Psalm 89, where it quotes how great God is and how he promised and vowed to make David a king regardless of what will happen. And all the promises were broken, and no happy end. And it ends with, blessed will be the name of the Lord, and that's it. And no happy end.
I mean, still not glorifying suffering. That's like, it's saying, at least in what I understand in the Jewish tradition, is that God will be with us in our suffering. God is not further from us when we are suffering, but that doesn't mean that suffering is necessarily good and should be glorified. It's something that God is still with us, but it'd be better to be out of it if we could. We could still pray not to be suffering.
No, but we are not promised an end to the conflict. This is the thing.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, to have the greater picture here, Christianity was starting with the uprising of Christ. I mean, there's always the idea, even if there is suffering, the idea in Christianity, the most strongest idea in Christianity is death is not the end. And of course, you have also ideas like that in Judaism, but in Christianity it's central. This is why this religion was so successful as it is today. So if we talk about suffering, in one meaning, there is always a happy ending, because there's always the idea that the dead are going to rise from the dead. And this is the central idea of Christianity.
Timotheus, I feel that you like to comment, no?
No, I have nothing to add. I really admit that you said also main points already.
Annika, you want to say something? You raised your hand before? No. Okay, so again, we should think about it, and I think that the main point of Genesis, the direction that Genesis takes, is from, it started with God creating the world and the terrible conflict of the deluge and the destruction of the world. And then Abraham seems like sunshine, that all is well, but then it goes, the conflict gets deeper and deeper. And somehow the relationship with God is through the conflict. I think we should talk about it next time. We just read 17 verses, and the thing goes on, as you know.
I'm gonna send out a new invitation to vote on a date.
Okay. Just a short comment. We'll start with Sonia. Just one sentence. What do you think?
Well, I take from this session to think about how the relationship from the perspective of God to Abraham and Jacob differs, and how different people interact differently with God. That's what I'm going to think about some more.
Rachel?
Yeah, what Annika said, that God knows how we see him differently, and then he reacts differently to us. And it's really interesting that he is different to us because we know him different, kind of.
Dagmar?
I take from the 7 to think about that I always see Jacob as a little boy, even if he's a grown man already. Because he's the grandchild, and I see him, I pick how much I see him as the little one, even, yeah.
Yes, it's the prophet Hosea says that Jacob is a boy and I love him. Nar Israel. Israel is a boy and I love him. Daniel?
Again, the difference between Jacob and Abraham, but also specifically in terms of the way that Abraham struggles through his life with faith, will God fulfill the promise? Jacob also struggles with that idea, hence the similarity in terms of God telling them to go back to the land, the Lech Lecha. But I think I want to think more about how Jacob's struggle with faith is similar and different to Abraham's.
Good. Miriam?
Yeah, I mean, I only got half of the class. I'm sorry, I had to see a doctor. But what I took is a thought that does God only promise those who are in conflict situations to be with them? Or how do we know if we're not in conflict or not sent on a mission that God is with us? And that's what I had in mind, because it was like God is with us in the suffering, but how do we know and how do we feel him when we're not suffering? That's what I had in mind.
Very interesting. Chezi?
I think that most of us is not, we are not like Abraham, that suddenly God talk with us. But most of us is like Yaakov. We should heard what the sons of Lavan tells us, and to see the face of Lavan, I mean to see the reality, and only then we can hear what God tell us.
Good. Timotheus?
So there were many wonderful comments. What was especially a new idea for me, what was Rami said, that Jacob could read in the faces.
Good. Avraham? Unmute yourself and I can do it.
Yeah, I learned that God promised to Jacob, I will be with you. Though God knows ahead, there was to confront the angel, confront the brother, I will be with you. And that is a strong statement for me.
Wonderful. Axel?
I still think about the different relationship between God and Abram on the one hand, and God and Isaac on the other hand. And I think that there are two different people, and so the relationship has to be different. If God really links to a person, then because the persons are different, so the relationship has to be different as well.
Good. Annika?
I took with me the thought from the very beginning of what is a comfort zone, and maybe for some people it's more comfortable to like stay in action and do many things, and it would be better to leave that and to come to the calm, and the other way around. Or for some people it's more comfortable to fight and for other people it's more comfortable not to fight. And so to leave the comfort zone, I have to think about what is my comfort zone so I think for the first time since Wittenberg, I really understood what you mean with comfort zone. Yeah.
Elisa and Aviram, comments? Short comments, what are you taking from us?
You're still on mute.
Thank you. Good point. So one thing that really interests me in this story is that there are so many overlapping themes. There usually are in most of these stories, but so many overlapping with Yosef when Benjamin is given the cup, but then Rachel takes something from Lavan and he has to come look for it. It comes out to look for him 3 days later. There's so many overlaps, and I'm just thinking about how they happen differently in the different stories and what that means.
Good. Aviram?
When the Israelites were in the desert, God was closer to them than more. What do you say?
Than he was.
Than he was when they got into Israel. So I think that Abraham is the Israelites in the desert, and Yaakov is in the land of Israel. And still the purpose is to get into Israel. So maybe Yaakov's relation to God is more closer than we think.
Okay, we'll see later.
Yeah.
Barbara, do you hear us?
Yes, of course. I'll take with me the thought of how the relationships are different between Abraham and God and Jacob, because I never thought about that.
So we'll continue thinking about it. Rolly, your final word.
Connecting to what you beforehand about Yaakov. It's that being confused or being unsure is not the same as not having faith, because a lot of our discussion was about how this is his journey, a journey of faith, but journey of faith is doesn't always look like it looks with Abraham, it looks differently. And I always come back when I see Yaakov to that kind of thinking, that being sure, how does that fit in to a journey of faith?
I see.